Welcome, everybody, to the first edition of the Laravel Worldwide Meetup of this year. It's a pleasure to be back. Like usual, we have two awesome guests that will deliver two kick-ass talks. Later, Claudio Dekker will join me. Claudio, if you don't know him, he's one of the core developers of Inertia. And yeah, it's an amazing technology that gets a lot of love in the Laravel ecosystem. So it made sense to have something about inertia here. But first, we have Francisco Madeira, who is going to talk a little bit to us about Termwind. Let's bring him over here. Hey, man, good evening.
Hi, Freak.
And yeah, thanks so much for being on this stream. I've already seen Termwind a little bit in action, and you've actually helped me a lot with it while I was learning and using it for the first time. Um, I think Nuno started with the project, but you
Yes,
gave it
yes.
a lot of love as well, I think, right?
Yeah, I'm not the best with the starting idea, but normally I kind of improve others' ideas.
Yeah, and we need that too in open source.
Yeah.
So that's a very useful thing that you're doing. Yeah, I've only seen Termwind in action in a couple of my projects, but I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of more that Termwind can unlock. I've
Mhm.
seen today a design that you made in our health package, which was kick ass. So I guess we'll see some more of that CLI goodness during
Yeah,
your
I
talk.
think so.
Okay, so let's not wait any longer.
Yeah.
I'll give you the stage, and
Okay.
you go ahead and enjoy yourself explaining all this goodness to the masses.
Okay. Thanks, Freak. Let me know if you are seeing my screen. Okay, should be good to go. So, I'm Francisco Madeira. I'm a software developer. I'm from Portugal, and I work with PHP for more than 10 years. I'm also a co-author of Termwind, as I was speaking before. Termwind was created by Nuno. And what is Termwind? Basically, Termwind is kind of like Tailwind CSS. If you don't know Tailwind CSS is a utility-first CSS framework that allows you to style without even make any CSS files. You can use just utility classes from that. But don't worry, if you don't know nothing about Tailwind CSS, this talk is for you as well. So we use HTML as our main API, and we took a modern approach of from Tailwind CSS and a comfortable way to style it and to structure it from HTML. As I was telling you, Termwind was created by Nuno. Nuno is a well-known guy on the PHP community. If you don't know Nuno, if you check your vendor file, there probably is code from Nuno. It's a really great guy. So let me jump right in. Before Termwind, that was really tough to style anything on the terminal. It's difficult to write, it's difficult to read, it's very difficult to maintain. I would say it's impossible to make sure the escape codes are correct. So it takes loads of time to check if you need to bold what is the correct escape code. And let me share you one example. And if you can look at this, and I myself, I don't even know what this does. Since since the text is bold, so I mean probably there is some kind of bold, some kind of color maybe. Yeah, but it's impossible to know those escape codes do. So let me show you what this really does. Just this. So as you can see, a simple example like this, it's that difficult. So even if you know some kind of color to set on the escape code, you have to know the order. If bold comes first, then if you need to add the background color or the text color, it's kind of impossible to know. And if you want to go from this path, it's really difficult to maintain, and yeah, you will lose a lot of time. So let me show you with Termwind how to make the same exact example. So in this case, I just have one project. with just the autoload from Composer, and the only package that we are importing is Termwind. So we are using the Termwind render function, so we can go and render, and just to get some HTML uh, look here, we are using this. We can use a simple string that's also supported. So let me just so have some syntax highlighting. So we can go ahead and just say bold. That's the text. Let's run it. Example, and as you can see, okay, the text. So what we see here? So we see here just some kind of, I think, two spaces. So maybe it's just we can add a margin. It means margin, and we can add a margin on the left of 2. Okay, and as you we can run it, and then we can see the changes live. So also we see a background color. So a BG means background, so we can go with background blue and 500, for example. That's a color. Let me show you. That's a color that we can get from Tailwind CSS, for example. We can go here and check, for example, for background colors, and that is all the colors that we support with Termwind. So anything that is in the Tailwind website colors, we have the support on Termwind. So let me continue for this. For as I remember, there is some kind of padding here. So padding 1 and the text color, so red. Let's check how this looks. Okay, it's close. Maybe the font, I think it's bold, and basically that garbage is basically this, way more easy to understand. So even if you don't know anything about Tailwind, you can check here and see, okay, there's some kind of margin, background color. I don't know what 500 means, but okay, but it's some kind of blue, some padding, and some bold, and as easy as this. So after this week, I will show you a few more examples of what Termwind supports. So for example, what I like to do in my CLI applications is to add some margin on top and on the bottom to have more breathing room, as well as on the left. So we can go ahead and add a wrapper here with some margin on the x-axis and some margin on the y-axis. For example, so x means x-axis, so horizontally. So and I means y-axis, so vertically. So one space on the top and on the bottom, and two spaces on the left and on the right. So we can wrap it here, and then okay, we can close it, just like we are doing some kind of website, and we can run it, and okay, there is 4 spaces because we did not remove the margin left to on this element. There is another thing that Tailwind supports, that is the inheritance, like just like on a browser. So every line will respect the inheritance from the parent. So in this case, we are adding a margin on the x-axis of 2, so every element will every new line will add the two spaces in this case for the terminal. Let's run again, and it's already looking better. So for example, let's go ahead and for example, for this example, let's go and say, like, let's check, it's probably a passing, let's say, let's change it to green, for example. Let's take a look. Maybe the text red looks bad, so we can go with text black, maybe an uppercase, and maybe we want to add just a text on the right saying what did pass. So let's go ahead and add another. If we add another div, the text will be on the bottom. So let's check it. So just like on the browser, a div is kind of a display block element, so it renders one below the other. So for this case, let's add another div and wrap this up, change this to an inline element like span, for example, and in this case should be good. Let's say your deploy was successfully. See how this looks. Okay, looks good. We can add some margin on the left here, maybe two. Let's check it. Okay, it's looking good. And as you can see, is basically is this simple. There is nothing complicated about that. It's just simple HTML, like you do for the for your websites. So text gray. Let's say let's change this to a text gray to not be too bright on the. Okay, looks good to me. And what can we add more here? So we can add here, for example, an header. For example, we can add an header. Let's say with our title project. In this case, let's add Termwind examples. Okay, we can go and add some styling. And for example, in this case, we can add a blue 500. Let's add some spacing, so a padding x of 2. Let's make it full width, so we can uh, uh, we can have it with the full width of the terminal. In this case, it will also respect the margin. So if we run it, let's see it. It respects the margin from the parent. If we remove the margin, it uh, it um, it takes the full terminal space. So as you can see, there is a lot of power with Termwind and this HTML engine that is on top of Termwind. So we can also add here maybe a margin bottom of 1. We can text center. Okay, for example. Okay, maybe a font bold. As you can see, we are styling on the go, as we normally do with our own websites. So, and also I'm showing here that you can use HTML5 tags. So this header does not mean anything to the CEO, but it's kind of a marker to see. Okay, this is the header. So you can take advantage of that to organize your code better. So what can we do, for example, here? For example, we can also add, let's say, a version. So we can have a version like 0.1.0 here. And we probably want to align this on the right. In this case, since we are adding a new element, let's remove the text center on the top and let's see. Okay, it does not align to the right. Since it's an inline element, it does not take the rest of the width of this of the parent. It only occupies the width of the text. So for this case, we can also take advantage of the width with fractions like Tailwind support. So we in this case we will use like half of the size. And on this, let's add also half of the size of of the parent. So if we check it, okay, it's good. And also maybe to have this looking better, let's remove the font bold, move to here. Let's change the text color to black, maybe. Not sure if it looks good. Does not look good. Let's remove the text black. And as you can see, it's really you style on the go. So what can we do here to improve this styling? We may add some padding on top and on the bottom. We can go with the padding top or padding bottom, or that will work. Or we can take advantage of the padding on the y-axis as well. Works like the same way as the margin. And it just works and is as clean as this. As you can see, it's just plain HTML, and everyone can just go with web knowledge to make a good sale application with some good designs. So also we can add here, for example, a footer. Add here a footer. Take advantage of the HTML5 tags. Let's go ahead and add some kind of gray background. Let's maybe 500. Let's let's say some padding on the x-axis to be the same as the other. Let's add some text here. You can learn more about Termwind on GitHub. So we also can add an A element. So we can link this to the GitHub as well. So github.com, Nuno Maduro, Termwind. And probably a lot of you did not know that was possible with the terminal, but you can have links on the terminal. This does not look good, but let me show you that I can click on this link and it will open. That will open on the browser. It's exactly like you are building a website. So let's go ahead and just style this a bit more. So we can add here, for example, margin top one, and it basically just works. What can we do here to improve it a bit more, to have a better experience for for the users? So one thing that I'm seeing here, for example, is a margin bottom here to have some space here, and the margin top here to have some space here. We can take advantage of another utility class that comes from Tailwind, that is the space utility. Many of you guys already know about this, but in Termwind you can also use that one. So we can add a space on the y-axis of 1. In this case, we can remove this margin bottom here and this margin top here, and basically the space will add spaces between the elements. So one space in here and another space here, and it will work exactly the same. And you can clean uh, the you can clean those classes in this case. So if you add another div here, let's check. It will respect the same thing. It will add the space. No need to add a margin top again on this element. So another thing that's for example, with this repetition, so with this duplication, let's get it back. As you can see, we are also we can some of the some developers don't like to repeat code, and we can also, for example, create a class with Termwind. So in this case, we can create a title class. Let's go ahead and create a title class. So to create a title class, we can import from Termwind the style function. Okay. With the style function, is basically just like CSS. We can go here and style what is the name of the class. In this case, is title, and what we want to apply. We can apply those utility classes from Tailwind, and in this case, it will just works. It's easy like this, and the code looks much cleaner. And if you want to change a color here, you go ahead and change, and it will change on both sides. Okay, it basically just works. Also, another thing that people probably are questioning is if I have kind of some kind of color that that I use for my brand is a specific color, how can I use it? And that's also a support. There is also a support with the style function. So we can go ahead and use style. And in this case, let's change the green 600 and set the color to be the only color I know from memory is the bad 55, the bad S color. So as you can see, it will change the color for that brand color that you have. As easy as this. So what more things that we support here with Termwind? For example, we can add an ordered list. For example, let's add 3 tasks: task 1, task 2, task 3, and as you can see, it basically just works. You can even I don't like the bullets, so let's take it out. List none, and it takes it out. I want to add some kind of margin. You add the margin, and it works just like on the browser. I'm saying this too many times, but that's the truth. I can even I can't believe myself that we can build CLI applications with HTML, but that's true. So we can go ahead and change this to ordered list, for example, and it will work just like in the browser, as I was telling you before. So you get the point. We can go ahead and add a code, a table, almost everything that we have in HTML. There is support on Termwind. You can see more of that on the on our documentation. Uh, all the elements that we support: a P, a span, a B, a strong and high, a hem, a strike, a break line. All of that you can see from the documentation. So One more cool thing that we see a lot on CLI applications, for example, with the GitHub client or something, that when we need to log in, it will ask for an email address. That's a normal thing that we see on CLI applications, is asking questions to the end user. So we also added into Termwind an ask function that will work exactly like the render. So we can actually style the question. So in this case, let me show you. We can use ask. We can use the same API, so HTML. In this case, let's do just an inline component to have the question. So let's ask for, what is your email? And class, let's add, for example, a margin on the left. Let's add some kind of padding, some background. Let's keep the bed as color. Some is green 600, some text black. And as you can see, you go with the flow in here. So we can add maybe a margin right of one, uh, and probably font bold. Let's see how this looks. And we can run this on the terminal. And as you can see, we did style the question. How cool is that? So let me just answer. So John Doe, and it renders the next thing on the code. So to get the answer from the ask method, we can the ask method basically returns the answer. So we can get it here the answer. So and then we can show it here on the content. So we can go ahead and the answer, the email address is, and let's wrap this up, answer, and it will basically just works. Let's go ahead and run it. Okay, the email address is John Doe. Basically, it just works. Also, another thing that people may ask is that terminal is kind of a mess. A lot of things going on. Since I'm running again and again, my terminal is super messy. So, how can we clean the terminal? All We also support a terminal function, so a terminal function from Termwind. And then, for example, after the question, we can go ahead and take advantage of the terminal clear method. So let's go ahead and run it. So johndoe.com, and it basically clears the old terminal before the next scanner. It looks super clean, adds some breathing room, has all the information that your application needs to show, and that's basically it's super simple. Everyone that has some kind of web knowledge will know just this basic HTML stuff with the class they can find on Tailwind CSS website. They can go on the Termwind documentation and check what is available or not, and it's simple as this. So even after you see those things, you may have some kind of questions. So why should I style a CLI application? Maybe it's that difficult. I should not bother styling it. So as you seen before, you can make it user friendly. Yeah, has some breathing room. You can make it easier to the eye. You can make it memorable. For example, with that header, imagine if you have another comments on your application, you can have some kind of header that identifies your application. And the most important thing for me is you can save time from the end user. So, for example, just this fatal error from PHP that everybody already saw in one of this. So there is no styling. As you can see, it's a fatal error, uncaught error, undefined constant on line 7. It's on the end of the path. So it's not that quick to figure it that is on the line 7 in what error it is. So a good style like collision will improve that experience. So in this case, it highlights the most important information, so it's an error, and highlights the exact line. So the end user will see this and will jump back in on the code and fix it right away, instead of, okay, it's undefined constant on the lines, okay, 7 on the file That's way easier to have some styling that highlights the most important information, and that you can save time in your projects. That's pretty good. Also, before I finish, I have um, I have some new features that are not yet available, that I want to share with you. For example, here I have just Laravel application, application. It's basically, it's not a Laravel application, it's a Laravel zero application. It's basically the same thing. Let me show you Laravel zero. It's basically the same thing, but just for console applications. Made more sense to use that than the Laravel, but the same things will work with Laravel itself. So let me show you. Here I have one comment called the games comment, and just from this, as you can see, we are using a view, a blade view for the terminal. As many of you guys were that were watching, say, okay, I don't want to have the HTML on my PHP functions. That's bad. Well, you can take advantage of blade views or symphony views or anything that renders HTML. You can take advantage of that, and that's what I did here. So I'm rendering a view called games, and let me show you the view games.played. So in here, let me close this. Let me close this. In here, I have just a blade view with some for eaches, as we are used to do with blade for the browser. Some if, the normal stuff we do exactly for the browser, and we can use this directly with the render function from Termwind. Let me show you this example. So PHP application games. Okay, it shows the game. In this case, is it's a live score platform that shows some football matches. There are some dummy football matches that I filled here, but you get the point. And what could be cool that we can have here would be cool to have here it auto refreshing the times, the goals, and with Termwind we have a function. We will have a function called live that we can pass a closure here, and the view, and then the view, and then we can say, okay, we want to refresh this content uh, in every second. So if we run this, as you can see, it will give you the live feel. In this case, there will be no goals, but you can see how powerful it is. So one more thing with the live that is really cool. Since we are using views and the live, we can take advantage of one really cool thing that we are used to also in the browser. That's, for example, that's the auto reloading. That's, for example, imagine that we can change this x to another color. We can go ahead and without running the code again, we can change here. Just save the file, and it will update just like we do with auto-reloading on the browser. How cool is that feature? We can go even further, and let's say red is not good, it's bad, so let's get back to gray, and go ahead and, for example, in this time, let's remove the text red, let's go in text black, let's add some padding on the X, let's make maybe a blue 300, and you can see you just style like you do on the browser with auto reloading. Another thing that would be cool to have is as many of you already saw, the ask method, that we could see the details of one of these games. For example, normally we could do like something ask what select the game, and, for example, ask for one, for two, for three, and then the person answers what game they will go. But what even if we can select it with our own functions? That would be a better experience for the end user. And we are also working with a select method. Let me show you. I have one example here that is built on top of live. So it accepts a closure. In this case, receives the options. It receives what is the active option. In this case, I'm not using the options since the options are only the games, and I'm rendering the leagues with the games. But we can get the active, and you can see the point of this. So, and also it refreshes every 1 second. Made sense to this application, but for yours could be less, could be more. And and let me show you how it looks. Let me close it. Let me run it. And as you can see, I'm navigating with the arrows, and it basically just works. We can go ahead and then select one game and then click on the enter. In this case, I have here prepared one example with the detail of one game, and it basically just works like this. It auto refreshes. It allows you to select from the arrows, and normally in PHP we don't see this kind of approaches. We normally see the answer with the one, with the two, or with some kind of word. And let's go ahead and check here what is going on. So after we get the active from the selects, we do the terminal clear to have a clean terminal, and then we take advantage again with the live method to have the game itself. And let me show you just the game blade view that that you can see here. We are also take advantage of the blade components. So we have a blade component called header. Let me show you. So we have here a blade component called header that only has the header code and event sub, event goal, event card. And as you can see, it can look as clean as this. So basically, building a CLI application can be just building a website. So it's as simple as this. So let me just go ahead and close and and show you just one more example that I have here that Freak already already called about. That's the Laravel alt example in here. Just a simple example I did this morning in this PR. It looks just clean, and it may look difficult to do, but if I show you the HTML, it's quite simple. Let me show you here the HTML for that view. It's um, it's that simple. So list CLI, and you can check. Freak also have another blade views for the browser, and there is one for the CLI. And as you can check here, there is nothing special about this. There's some wrapper with some kind of margin, some width full, some max width, some background, and it's just basically a view for the browser. And if you render this kind of view on the browser, it may look good as well. So that's it for me. Thank you. You can follow me on Twitter and on GitHub at Shiku2K. And thank you, Freak. Back to you.
That was pretty epic. I can tell you that in the chat, a lot of minds weren't blown. There were a lot of cool comments, but let me show you this one from Robin. That's it. I'm replacing my web application with CLI apps. So there is definitely somebody
Yeah,
somebody
that's
happy there.
possible.
So yeah, thanks for showcasing this. Personally, I'm also very interested in knowing how it works behind the scenes. Now, you don't need to do that now, of course. I don't want to put you
Okay.
on the spot, but maybe we can talk about doing a session about that as well for people that
That
want to
sounds
see
good.
some of the internals as well. As I can imagine, there are some cool things going on there as well.
Yeah,
But
yeah, for sure.
okay, you've done it. Your first talk.
Yep.
Congratulations, and it's already an epic one. So, uh, job very well done,
Yeah.
I'd say.
Thanks, Freak.
Okay, then we are going to go for a little break, and we will be back in a couple of minutes, and then we will have Claudio here. See you in a couple of minutes. Hi, everybody, and welcome back. I hope that your mind has been a little bit repaired after it was blown a couple of times during Francisco's talk. And yeah, get ready to blow your mind or let it be blown again. We're now going to start our second talk, and our speaker here is Claudio Dekker. Hey, Claudio.
Hello.
Welcome to this meetup. You'll be talking about Inertia, right?
Yes.
It's a technology that is loved by the Laravel community a lot. It started out as like this strange idea by Jonathan, but boy, it has grown. Um, and
Yeah, totally.
you've already spent quite some time on developing it as well, right? You're on the core team.
Yeah. Yeah, me and Jonathan are doing it together now. So
Yeah,
yeah.
must feel good that like a lot of people are now using your ideas and the things that you put a lot of love in.
Yeah, and it's also a funny story for me because it really demonstrates like how you can get from absolutely just being nobody, like a normal person, like a collaborator, someone who just uses something and likes something, to contributing,
Mhm.
to becoming part of this team. And in my case, after that, also getting hired by Laravel, where I'm now no longer at, by the way, but still
Yeah,
mentioned it. Oh, well.
yeah. Open source gives a lot of people opportunities. That's true. I
Yeah.
think it will also give somebody like Francisco also opportunities who didn't invent Termwind but contributed to a lot to the idea. And it's the same with you. You didn't.
Same with me.
I don't think you did invent Inertia, but you helped it mature. So yeah.
Yeah, so it's actually a funny story because, like, I remember the same blog post that you do, where Jonathan essentially showed this really weird technique where you do a lot of if statements and weird combinations of echoing JSON into a blade view, and it and creates this JavaScript app, and it's super weird. And when I first saw that, I was like, no, 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 this is too weird. I don't want any part of this. I'm just gonna stick with Blade, known, familiar, trusted, safe. Like the golden standard. But yeah, he converted me. I mean, it took a few years, but at some point, like I kept a close eye on it, and I saw it go through its evolutionary steps. And at some point, yeah, I had a bit too much time on my hands, and I started like digging into it and figuring out like what is it all about, and just started contributing and snowballed from there. So
Yeah. Nice, nice, nice. Okay, I'm not going to take more time from you, so I'm going to give you the stage. I'll share your
all right,
screen and then you can
yes,
go along. Let's share your screen. There you go.
all
Have
right,
fun, Claudio.
all right. Thank you. All right, so yeah, again, my name is Claudio Dekker. I used to work on Laravel as well, that just ended. But even longer, I've been working on Inertia. And that's been something I've been working on together with Jonathan since I think July, June 2020. So coming up to 2 years now. And yeah, because like things are changing rapidly, I'm now the one giving a talk on what's new on it, which is admittedly kind of crazy for me because this is also the first talk I'm ever giving. Um, anyway, let's get into it. So, what's new in Inertia? We're essentially going to go over server-side rendering, the existing as well as the new form helper methods, and what you can expect next from Inertia. This is going to be a live demo for most of it. So I'm definitely going to screw up, and you are like gonna make fun of me and celebrate it and like maybe code along. I mean, whatever makes it joyful for you. So, server-side rendering. Basically, with SSR enabled, your site will become a uh, indexable thing, a fast thing. Um, I actually had notes on this that I totally lost. Um, yeah, but basically, with SSR enabled, you have a website that is no longer just JavaScript. And a big part of JavaScript and like JavaScript based websites is that they take a long time to be indexed by Google. And the reason for that is because if you just look at the HTML code, you end up with a lot of gibberish. And this is a problem for most search engines because they are just regular HTML parsers. Now, ever since 2018, or probably even before that, Google actually did a thing where they index your HTML first, and if they figure it is mostly JavaScript, they will then essentially put a ticket on the backlog of like, hey, we have to go to that site later using a real browser. And then they go to that site again, like a week later or whenever, like on average, at least a week later. Basically, whenever they have resources available, as they call it themselves. As mentioned, around 1330 in their Google I/O talk in 2018. So yeah, 2018, they've been doing this for quite a few years. And basically, they go back with a real browser to your website. They crawl it again after the actual JavaScript has run. And then they have an actual correct index. And this makes it searchable in Google. The problem is it takes a week on average. And that's something that Inertia with SSR aims to solve. So with SSR enabled, your sites are searchable in Google sooner. Another benefit is that on an initial visit, as you can see right there, the pages are significantly faster. And the reason for that has to do with that you are no longer first having everything sent to the browser, including like your JavaScript and like all your CSS and you name it, and then having the browser to parse it, run it, and then draw or paint, as they call it, the entire page in the browser. Instead of having all of that, you have the server being all ready to go, getting this request, and already having the JavaScript because it's all local, parsed. It basically has the time there to parse the page immediately and send the rendered HTML to the client. As a result, the moment that you are done loading the page, or rather when you are done starting to load the page, so before any of the JavaScript and CSS has actually reached you, the HTML is already there, because there is no way for your browser to know, well, there are ways, but that's besides the point. There is no good way, no standard way for your browser to know what it needs to do before loading the instructions from the HTML first. So HTML comes first, then the JavaScript, CSS, etc., images, you name it. By having the HTML sent immediately from the server, pre-rendered, it's already there, and that's why you can see the page load quicker. So it's faster, even though you are doing an extra step of rendering on the server. Now, another benefit is that it's browsable on older devices, because you might have an old, like Windows 95 machine that doesn't support the latest ECMAScript, ES6 standard, and WebAssembly, and you name it, but it does still have the HTML standard. And for the most part, it's remained mostly unchanged. So by having the HTML pre-rendered, you're able to render your sites on older devices that don't know how to run the JavaScript. And the benefit of this is that, like, even though it doesn't give you the full rich experience, it gives you an ability to click around to a basic degree on older devices. Now, a downside is that it's slightly more difficult to maintain because, as I mentioned, SSR, it means server-side rendering, which already kind of implies it happens on the server. And because on the server there is no browser, there is no browser window. And so any references that your code base makes to the window object, or any plugins that you might have, like a carousel or you name it, any rich navigation thing, if it calls the window, it will not work, and your SSR will fail. To keep it maintainable in that way, it is slightly more difficult. That's one of the downsides, but again, it doesn't really reach out to the upsides. And another thing is that it's really only visually faster. As you saw before in the quick demo I had on the same slide, it loads the page faster, but it only sends the HTML. It still needs to, well, in comparison, having no HTML and just having the JavaScript render in the browser has less HTML in the document itself, whereas having the pre-rendered HTML has a lot more content in the document itself. So in a way, it sends more data, but because it renders faster, the user who's perceivably looking at your website is able to see, read, interact with your site quicker, even though in the background, the actual page is still being connected back to JavaScript. And this allows you to, assuming you have 100 milliseconds or so, have the whole rich experience like you would usually have without SSR, but with SSR. So this is about the forum helper. We'll get into that later. So let's get this show going by setting up a fresh application. So in this case, I'm just going to make a new Laravel app worldwide. After it runs for a little bit, and I'm just gonna use the CLI Git a little bit. I usually use fork GUI, so bear with me if I do stupid stuff. Anyway, we'll go into our worldwide directory. We'll link it to Valet so we can reach it in the browser. That's done. Then another thing we are going to do is we're gonna, let's see, open it in PHP Storm. So I think you can see this. I really hope so. It's a fresh project. That's the whole goal. I want to go through the project as soon as possible, as quick as possible, to see and show you how difficult it is, or rather not, to set up a fresh Inertia app and then to add SSR on top of that. So we have our application. It's all fresh. I'm going to quickly set up the database here. That's set up then. That's good. Migrate it. I don't think there's a lot to go on there. And then from this point on forward, we're essentially in a clean installation. So I'm going to initialize Git, add everything, initial commit everything. I have a YubiKey, so I have to confirm it. Yep. All right, there we go. So the first thing that we need to do to build your Inertia app is to install Inertia itself. So we're going to composer require Inertia.js, Inertia Laravel. And the reason we're requiring this is because we're using a Laravel application with Inertia. And this is specific to the backend itself. So with that package installed, we can go back to our application and ignore PHP Storm's warnings. And let's see, everything's going well. Yeah, so far. All right, great. So yeah, with the Laravel package installed for Inertia, we can go ahead and create a root view. And the root view is basically what Inertia uses to transfer the main document and make the browser aware. And this is essentially something that typically is done in Blade. So that's also what we are going to use for it. And that's also what we pretty much only support, but just to give some context on how it works in the background. So I'm going to create an app Blade. I just removed the welcome view because we really don't need that. And then I'm going to initialize the default view. And that's essentially a really simple standard HTML block with no title. That's something that's important, and I'll get back to that later. 2 references to Laravel Mix for both the CSS and JavaScript. The JavaScript is really the only thing we're going to need here, but still good to have some styling. And then one important thing that I'm doing here is I'm saying defer loading the app itself. And what this essentially instructs modern browsers is to not wait for the whole page to be done loading before loading the script. I'm essentially saying, it does the opposite. It doesn't stay there and wait for the app.js to be downloaded, which can be a huge file, before continuing to render the other page. It instead says, hey, you can go ahead without me, render the entire page, and whenever you're ready to download this file, download it and run it. So that's what the defer argument does. And if you're having experiences with SSR that are not that great, that's the one you'll need. Then one thing I'm setting up is an @inertia head directive and the @inertia directive in the body. This is essentially something that SSR will use for injecting head tags, as well as the inertia tags when using SSR. So, all right, root view created. Next thing we'll need to do is create a middleware, because Inertia has its own middleware to render and parse and understand the requests coming from Inertia. So we created a middleware using the built-in Inertia command. And with that, we will essentially have a middleware handle Inertia requests. You can see here's the same app root view that is defined there. The rest is pretty much like stuff you can customize. We don't really need to. The default is good for, I would say, 95% of the apps. So handle Inertia requests. One thing we do need to do is add it to the HTTP kernel. Specifically, or at least in the default that we recommend, is to add it to the web middleware group near the bottom. So we can add the handle inertia requests middleware, just like that. And that will essentially mean that the entire backend part of Inertia is set up. Now, as for the front-end part, we're going to first add Inertia.js inertia, as well as Inertia.js inertia view. And that will essentially install the two packages that we need. In our case, we're using the Vue2 adapter with Inertia. You can modify Inertia Vue to Inertia Vue 3 or Inertia React or Inertia Svelte if you want to use any of the other adapters. It really comes down to what language you want to use. In this case, we're going to go for Vue2 because, well, it's what I and a lot of people are the most comfortable with. So that's installed. Now my editor will start indexing because Node.js modules. Anyway, it's already done. That's good. Thanks, M1. Right, so we're going to create an app.js. And the app.js, for the most part, already exists because Laravel ships with one. It has a bootstrap file that basically references where Lodash and Axios are set up. We don't need any of that. I typically just comment this out and leave Axios. But in this case, I'm just going to say, nah, I'm just going to ignore everything and just create the default as per the documentation Inertia root template, app.js. And as you can see, it now creates an app. There are some typing issues. I think, yeah, we're ignoring the promise. Well, that's fine. That's a legacy thing. We don't need that. And that essentially sets up Inertia. This is pretty much the boilerplate template as you will find it in the documentation. So with all of that set up, we're creating an Inertia app. We are using the Inertia plugin, which exposes the Inertia and page $ command helpers properties. And then we're rendering Vue with our Inertia app and the props coming from the server. So that's what that does. This is all, again, is very boilerplate. Next thing we'll do is we will set up the Webpack mix file, which we already have by default, but we are going to modify it a little bit. So again, I'm going to use a live template, which helps me speed things up a little. So I have this mix file. So what this basically does is it uses the app.js we have and compiles it to public.js, app.js. In this case, we're indicating, hey, this is going to be a Vue Val version 2. And we're going to extract any scoped styles to a specific file. This is something I'm not going to go over here, but this is something that might help you if you have things not rendering properly when using no JavaScript on the front end with SSR. Then again, another thing I'm going to do is set up Tailwind. So we have the PostCSS plugin with Tailwind. As you can see, it's not yet installed, so we'll do that real quick. Yarn add Tailwind CSS. There we go. And then from there on, we are going to npx create, npx Tailwind CSS init, which creates the configuration file. So with that done, this should now start resolving after it's done re-indexing. It's a pain with PHP Storm, but it's totally worth it. If you ever try any other editors, it's just, the intelligence is incredible with the PHP Storm. So this is all working. Then we're going to set up the app CSS. Let's see. Tailwind CSS. Those are basically the defaults. And then we have our Tailwind config, which as well here, we're going to essentially do nothing but set up the content as well. So that we have some standard things that we want to purge. This is more or less a production default. You don't necessarily need to do this, but it helps keep your CSS builds smaller. All right, so with that done, we should, for the most part, be able to now run yarn build, or yarn watch, sorry. And that should run a watcher. Okay, it's complaining about dependencies because it's a fresh project. That's fine, we'll just rerun it. And we are getting a problem. Cannot resolve view. I think I made a mistake. And I think that mistake is now one of those fun things that happens. So just to explain this real quick, what's happening here is that, yeah, well, wait, no, it's not a mistake. Yeah, well, it is, but it's not. Basically, what I thought is that it was still using the yarn link from my development build, which is broken. But we actually just didn't install Vue because, of course, we didn't. So we'll just add Vue. resolves view 2.6, and maybe with a bit of luck it should work now. Cannot resolve pages, right? So that's a new error. That's essentially because Inertia expects a pages folder in the JS directory. So we're just going to make one, pages. And with a bit of luck, it should compile now. All right, so that's that. Now we already linked the, that's the wrong thing. We already linked the worldwide .test file. Yep, I'm gonna ignore this. Now it's complaining about the Wacom view. That's because we renamed it to app.js and then modified it, or app.blade. But we don't need it, so we're just going to modify the web PHP route because we're going to create an Inertia app. We don't need the default. So we're going to say route get / and we're just going to say, what shall we do? Well, Inertia. Let's just make it closure based so we can keep everything in one file for now. Return Inertia render welcome. Or let's say home, actually. That's more realistic. So we'll say home.view. And then we'll say root element, because that's still necessary in Vue 2. And we'll say hello world. And just for fun, we'll just add some and some. There. All right, let's see. So as you can see, because our watcher is still running, it's now rendering hello world. And if we look at the page source, we do see the root element that includes the information that Inertia is giving, which is basically, hey, load this component with these props, which are the defaults, at the URL / with a specific version hash. And there is no hello world. Now this actually makes sense because we don't have server-side rendering set up. So that's something that we will do next. So essentially, just to clarify real quick, if I create another page and I say contact.view, and I say background blue, and I say this is the contact page, and if I then in the web.php make another contact page, contact, all right, then if I then create a link inside our road view, link to Inertia, yep, to contact page, hello world. Now the thing is with link is that even though it's there, I haven't imported into this component and I haven't set it up globally. So that's actually something we'll do right now. I don't need to specifically name it, so I'm just going to not do that. Create your components. We say we need the link, and we're going to import the link from Inertia there. And with a bit of luck, I need to reload it, of course. There's now our contact page link, and if we click that, you will see that it goes to the contact page. Now, this is all fairly standard Inertia stuff. This is how you get started. As you see, we are now getting a JSON response instead of HTML because the whole JavaScript is on the client side. And so the only thing it really needs to do is swap out the components because there is no real page visits anymore. There's just the Ajax visits. And those are called Inertia pages. So, all right, with that done, we can do one more thing. So as you can see, and already saw in the root template, we do not have a title tag. And that's specifically happening because we need SSR to provide that for us when we're going to use that. So what you'll get now is that you just get the domain name or whatever the browser determines by default as the default tag, and you don't really have a way to modify it. Now, when you're using SSR, and since using SSR, we actually recommend using a new component called the head component. And it's a component, stop it, code. It's a new component, I'm just going to import it here, called head. And you can just reference it inside your view, anywhere pretty much. You can do it nested inside layouts or wherever you want. Just make sure to use a capitalized version. And then we can say the title is home in this case. Oh boy, this is annoying. All right, there. And then we should get a home page, right? Now, as you notice, like when I go to the contact page, it will remove itself, and if I go back, it's back. And the reason that works is because Inertia both handles it on the client side as well as the server side. So this reinserts our, let's see if we can make this a bit bigger. Inertia reinserts our title right there. And as you can see, if I click through to the other page, we will lose the title. And if I go back, it's back inserted back in. So, all right, this basically means you have an SPA ready. Similarly, we can add other meta tags in the body, meta name, foo, let's see, I think content, yeah, content is bar. If I now do the same thing, you will see that like instead of just having the title, we will also get the meta tag, and as I leave the other page, the meta tag will also be gone. Now, for the sake of consistency, we'll add it to the contact page as well. Let's see, there we go. Script tag, export default components, and then we want to import the head components from Inertia view. All right, just change this to base. Yep, and then it's not home, it's contacts. Now the nice thing is that this page itself, while it contains the title stuff, if you look at the rendered HTML, it doesn't actually render out a head component or anything. It's purely used to allow you to, in a blade or in a templating way, define the head title. As you can see on the contact page, it's now saying contact. The meta tag is called baz now. Foo is called saying baz. And as we go back, it changes everything back and everything works as expected. So that's all great. Now, SSR. With all of this set up, we will cancel our build because we don't need that for now. And we will add Inertia.js server. Now, this package is a simple wrapper that contains as the name is implying, a server, which is a basically Node.js HTTP server because SSR needs Node.js. Now, there are a few people in our community who have created separate adapters that replace this with a variant that, for instance, uses Lambdas on AWS to not have a constantly running server, but to do it in a serverless manner. We have some great resources for that, and I can tweet them later. But for this case, and for if you're running your service on Forge or DigitalOcean or Ploy or anywhere else, you will want to use the Node runtime because it's just running and you're already paying for the server anyway, so it doesn't really cost anything extra. So yeah, that's added. Then the next thing we want to do is we will want to make a separate Webpack file. And the reason we want to make a separate Webpack file, let's see, Webpack mix.mix.js, Webpack SSR.js, we'll just call it like that. Oh, geez, cannot type. The reason we want a separate Webpack file has to do with the fact that on the SSR we want to do, or on the server side of things, we want to do a couple of things differently. Specifically, we don't have a window object, and we need to instruct the builder that we're building a node process. I'm not inserting the right code template here. Did I? Yeah, this is the right one. All right. So as you can see, the differences, if I put them, let's see, can I put them side by side? The differences are basically very slim, and the whole goal of Inertia's stable version of SSR is to keep it very slim. As you can see, the main thing we're doing is we're telling Laravel Mix to not create a manifest file because we're only compiling the app for the sense of our local app and not for the context of the web. So while a manifest makes sense to make sure that the user always has a up-to-date version of their cached JavaScript files, we don't need that because the server is always, well, it's never running a cache. So we're just essentially saying, hey, don't touch, don't bother to generate a manifest file, which also implies don't touch the existing manifest file, or better, to put it shorter, do nothing with the manifest file. So this disables that. Then we have the SSR file that we're compiling to the public folder instead. You can put this anywhere else, it doesn't really matter, but it's important to not use your app.js, but your SSR.js. And then apart from that, I am saying, okay, we're still using version 2. We're extracting styles. I think this option is no longer necessary. And something that I'm not sure what it does, but it seems to be one of the built-in features of Laravel Mix, and it seems to be useful, is optimize SSR. This, as I can see, is being used by Vue itself, so it probably does something internally in Vue. I'm not sure, but I like optimizing things for SSR if we're doing SSR, so that's what we're doing there. Then what's important is to make sure that all of the rest is set up in the same way. As you can see, I'm setting up an alias here. That's for imports, so that you don't have to do // pages / whatever when you're importing things. But you can just do / or // and then your relative path, so that if you move your folders around, you don't have to change all your files. You just have to update the alias. You can see we're not doing that in the SSR. And that's actually kind of interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that over, because we will need that. Otherwise, our app will not run when it's compiled with those things. And then apart from that, I am compiling Tailwind in the app version, and I'm not doing it on the SSR because we already, because of the manifest and because of the web version, already have those things compiled. And then lastly, we're indicating to Webpack, hey, we're targeting Node.js with certain things, certain options. And that's basically all the differences. So to put it real simple, the only differences are the things that are commenting here, which means that for the most part, everything is the same. Now you see I'm using a local Webpack config file here. That's something I typically do to help PHP Storm understand the add reference better. So I'm just going to create that file. There we go. And right. So as you can see, there's a reference there to why I'm doing that. And then here, I'm also creating that reference already. And that's why it's not in the SSR app version. So what we will do, see, back out. So this, generates everything as expected. This is basically the file that's understood by PHP Storm. It's exactly the same as Mix would do. There's not really a lot of fancy stuff going on here. It's just a helper to make sure PHP Storm understands this specific line. So I created that file, and then within our SSR, I'm importing it. And together with the Mix default option for it, I'm importing it and then overriding any or adding any options if necessary, which in the case of SSR it is. That also means that on the Mix version, I actually don't need this, but instead I need Webpack config. And then I need to import my, let me just copy that over, import the Webpack config. There we go. And now that should be entirely the same, or at least mostly the same. All right, let's move on. This is taking way too long already. As you can see, it's still complaining about one thing, which is the Webpack node externals. So we'll also add that as well. So that's done. And then lastly, let's see my notes real quick. Right, yeah, that's pretty much it. So in our package JSON, I'm just going to create two aliases, or well, I can add it SSR, and that builds Mix with Mix config Webpack SSR.js. And that allows us to build the SSR thing. So let's see what it does. Yarn SSR. That runs the SSR command, and you can see it is now complaining because it cannot resolve SSR.js. And that makes sense because even though we have set it up in the SSR.js, we don't actually have a file that does that yet. So we'll create an SSR.js file. Do I not have a helper for that? I don't think so. Init SSR, is that it? Yeah, that's it. All right, we do have it. Great. So these files are even more similar, and this is where the server itself comes into play. Even though most of the logic here is handled by the server package and by the root inertia package, we created a simple wrapper that abstracts all of the logic in a simple closure, which makes the two pages or the two versions as equal as possible. You can especially see that if I copy this over. Of course, that won't work in the app.js, so we're just going to revert that in a moment. But as you can see, the main difference is that on the SSR side of things, we're accepting the page object directly because we're getting it from Blade through or we're getting it from Blade through a HTTP call instead of rendered from the Blade using props. So we can insert the page directly. We already have access to it at this point. And the other part is that we're using a renderer to render it on the server. Apart from that, almost everything is the same. We're using Vue with a plugin. We're creating the app. In this case, we're also mounting it. That's, I think, not really necessary. Yeah, right. We're not mounting it because there is no document. That makes sense. And so that's pretty much it. I'm going to revert this one because we don't actually need that. So you can see the apps are nearly identical, SSR and your web app. Let's close all of that out for a moment. All right. So SSR.js, you can see we're missing create renderer, which is imported from Vue server renderer, which is what Vue uses to render the Vue app on the server. And we will, of course, also need that because we are using Vue together with Inertia to server render it. That's done, added. Now that should also stop complaining. Great, you can see everything is like nicely hinted now. And now we should be able to run yarn SSR. Let's see if it builds. And it did, great. So what's next? Well, you would probably think you could just view the page and, well, of course you don't. It's not working. Why is it not working? Well, we haven't started the SSR server. So one way to do that is to add a separate command, which is essentially SSR run or something along those lines. You can do SSR build, rename that to keep them in the same namespace. I'm not doing JavaScript. Running node public JS SSR.js, which essentially starts our node server. So if we now do SSR run, unexpected, no comma, not PHP. So you can see Inertia has now started the SSR server on the Inertia lead speak port. And we should be able to, and we don't. Now, one extra thing, one last step that we are missing is that Inertia by default doesn't even bother to make a server-side rendered call because it's very likely you will not be using server-side rendering, right? I mean, not every app really needs it, even though I would encourage it, but it's an extra step of configuration. So not having it as a default is not a bad option. However, we do want it. So we'll cancel the build and we will now publish the Inertia configuration file. Service provider. There we go. So that copied the configuration file to our app configuration. If we take a look in there, we will see that there is an SSR config flag, which by default is not enabled. So we're changing this to true. And we will restart our SSR server. We didn't need to do that, but we stopped it, so we did start again, obviously. And with a bit of luck, we see that now the page is being rendered on the server. Now, yeah, like basically if you view the page and you're able to see it, that's what you get back from the server, that's your raw HTML. Now this also means that I'm able to disable my JavaScript here, which, no, that's not how that works in Firefox, which I do not know how to do in Firefox, so we're not going to do that, but just to show it for me that you are able to do that. And in fact, I should be able to click through and see the contact page, even though I'm viewing it and navigating through the page sources. And as you can see now also properly, the title and meta tags are being inserted. And if I disable the SSR and click through the contact page now, it will not be able to render on the server. So it will fail within a few milliseconds and it will give us the not rendered. Let me just increase that, I forgot about that. And it will give us the not rendered or the default apps.js. And for some reason it still was, but after a reload, it wasn't or isn't. So without and with, pretty obvious difference. Now, this, yeah, basically gives all the benefits that I mentioned before. There are a few drawbacks, which, as I mentioned in my initial slides, you cannot set up or use plugins that use the window. So just for the sake of demonstration, we'll do that. So let's say when the app, and yeah, there's another few things, which is that the app is not fully running on the server. It's only running enough to draw the page. which means that not all the page hooks are used. So you can use created, but you cannot use mounted because there is no such thing as mounted. That's the view hooks I'm talking about there. So let's reference the window. Well, when the page gets created, we'll set the window title to, or window document title to hello failure. There we go. And I will rebuild it. Rebuild SSR, or actually just rerun both, because I think I aliased. No, I didn't. Typically, what I do is I alias the two commands to automatically run. So I run mix in production and then npm SSR build, so that I'm doing both in the same run, to make sure everything is always up to date. And did you mean one of these, SSR build? No. Let's say npm run then. Run, there we go. So first it's compiling the web version, the app.js, and then it's running again to compile the SSR.js. So now they're both built. We can say, okay, well, let's run our SSR server. Everything is great so far. Everything is compiled. It's running great, but as we now look at the page, it should crash. Let's see, which page did we do it on? And it's not crashing because, of course, it's not. That's interesting. Created. Yeah, it's created, not create. Fun. Yeah, run prod. And then run the server after that. And server is running. And now we are, oh, it's blowing up. Window is not defined. So this is what I was mentioning. Even though you are able to use window, as you can see from the title here, on the client side in your browser, your server-side rendered app will not like it. And so that's when you get these kind of errors. And this doesn't just apply to window, but there are a few other things. But most important of all is that this occurs a lot in other apps, third-party plugins, that kind of stuff. All right, so that's basically SSR. That's how you set it up. That's how you run it from start. All in all, in my opinion, not that difficult. But of course, I'm the one maintaining it, so everything is easy. And that's how you run an entire SSR app. Now, let's go over some of the changes that we have added to the form helper, which are also some of the updates that I was going to talk about. This will not take too long, which is good, because I think we're pretty long already. So besides the default options that the form helper accepts, it also accepts a couple of other features. I mean, it's a helper for creating forms. So by itself, it's an object that wraps around regular key values. So you essentially create your form with an object and say, like, username is empty string by default because you want the user to fill it in. Password is null because it's the same reason. Yeah, this kind of stuff. So you create an object like that, and then you reassign it to a variable. That's how you create a form in Inertia. So it's a simple wrapper around that, and you can then access properties directly on that form by saying form.name or username, which will get you the value. But besides that, there are a couple of special properties and special methods that you can also call on it, reserved keywords, if you will, that can essentially help you with the form. The ones that are already known are isDirty, to help you see whether there are changes in the form. So by default, when you create the form with objects with defaults, it's not dirty, it's clean. So if isDirty will be false. And as you modify the values by saying form.username equals whatever, it changes the value and therefore it's dirty. And as you change it back, it goes back to not dirty again, so false. Then there's transform. Transform allows you to essentially, let's just create it real quick. I don't know if I'm running late on data or on time, but we'll hope not. So this is an Inertia form. So we'll create this default object. It's already suggesting something. Every now and then, it's a really good feature, this GitHub Copilot. So this creates an Inertia form using the Inertia plugin to get the form itself. Let's see, we want to not have the whole thing be the data. Want to return it, we say form is this Inertia form there. That's better. And then what we can do is on, let's say, what do? We'll create a method submit. Yeah, which default by post, fine with me. This is kind of weird. Oh, right, we're creating a norm. This is the wrong thing. So in this case, instead of using this inertia post request, we want to actually call the form and then say post to a specific endpoint. So say login or say contacts. Let's say login is better. And that then by default accepts all the normal visit options that you would have. So reserve, scroll, this kind of stuff. It's all there. You can all use it. That's all default stuff. Now, by default, if you have, let's see, if we just add a flag here, let's see, div is dirty, and then we say form is dirty. Oh. I'll say nope. Yep. Nope. So yes or no. I'm going to remove the hello world because we don't need that. We're going to create an input with the vModel set to form.email. We can set a default. Say let's say Claudio@ubia.net. There's the default. Oh, we don't need Discord. No, not today. Not today, Mr. Discord. All right, so that should be running again. Test. So it's not dirty, but as I start typing, well, should have used the color there. Not sure why it didn't. Strange. Oh, there we go. So it's not dirty, and as we type, it starts becoming dirty, which is as expected. That's a simple helper that allows you to set up local validation or to determine whether you should even submit. Now, once we submit, let's create a simple endpoint for that. Route get post, login, and then in there, we will sleep for a second and throw a new validation error, or rather, that's the wrong one. Email test. Not great, but it's fine. You're right. So if we add a button here, let's see. I'm making a mess out of things. Sorry about that. We create a form that we want to prevent the normal submission of, and once we do submit it, we want to call our submit method. And in there we have the fields as a normal form would be, and in there we have a button that says submits. All right, so I can get rid of that contact page link, I think, because that's really useless. Right, so we have that all set up. This all still works, and as I call submit, it should. Is it? Yeah, so it's calling login, coming back, but we don't see anything. So as far as we know right now, we didn't really submit anything. I'm calling it, it's not doing anything. So how can you know whether it's submitting? That's where second method comes in, which is also something we already have, is processing. All right. So it's not processing, but as we submit, it's processing, and then after a second it returns with a validation error, but we're not seeing the error. All right, we get a step further. Form.errors.length, we can call the magic errors property, and then essentially we can print that out, or we can just always print it out. Let's just do that, that's quicker. So you can see it's an empty object if there are no errors. As we submit it, as it comes back, it's done processing, it comes back with our test validation error on email. That's all pretty obvious. Now, one thing that Inertia does, or that you're able to do within Inertia, is to clear the errors. And I know this is going to, let's see. I know this is going off a little bit. So clear errors allows us to clear the form error so that you can input again without having to keep a copy of it and like reference it and only do it conditionally. So we can say now we've seen the errors, we're okay with it, let's clear them. So we'll get some errors, we'll have the errors, and then as we click the other button, it's not working. That's interesting. Can't convert undefined to objects. It's not working because undefined to object. Because it's not ready yet? No. Let's see. Click.prevent. Oh, that's fun. No, that was correct. Should be correct. Clear form errors. Let's see. Clear form errors. Should be correct then. Let's see. What about now? Yeah, so now it's clearing properly as expected. All right, cool. Those are all features we're used to. Now there's also properties such as has errors, so you don't have to check the field itself. I'll just add that without showing it. I can say has errors. That's one. And then also what we have is a reset. Now the reset is pretty useful, and the reset itself is one of the features that we recently added, but not that recently. And resetting it allows you to reset the inputs. So reset form, let's see, this form reset. And resetting the form allows you to, whenever you have changes and you figure out, you're like, no, I want to go back to how it was, you can go and reset it. Now, one of the problems with this is that if you make, let's say, an update call to an endpoint that updates a value, let's say you have a user contact and you update this user contact by resetting the, how do you call it? Yeah, by updating the value and then resetting it, it will reset the form back to how it was before. And the problem with that is that you then essentially get your old data again, the wrong data, the outdated data. And so far, people have had to reload the page or recreate the form and override the existing instance. But with the latest version of Inertia, we've added a simple thing, which is called defaults. And defaults, set defaults. And default allows you to reset the defaults essentially. So say like, no, when the form is going to reset to these values instead. This form defaults. And by defaults, you can just give nothing and it will use the current values. Now, this is something that's useful to use inside your submit or unsuccess handler so that you don't have to worry about, let's see, everything's still fine. Yeah, so you don't have to worry about like checking values or calling it every now and then. You can simply use the unsuccess or watch error for props. It's also updated if you're setting values from a prop. So as I do this, I can say defaults, and then if I reset it and then reset the form, you'll see it resets to this wrong value. And because these are the new defaults, it's no longer a dirty form. That's one of the new features that we recently added. A nice thing with it is that you can only also specifically only give a single field or multiple fields, or even give an object where you say the name will be the new default and the email will be whatever, essentially that. Yeah, apart from the errors, we also added a set errors. So that's similar to the set defaults, but instead of like resetting the defaults itself, it will just set the errors on the form. So you don't actually, let's say you have a separate call that you make an API call, an actual API call outside of Inertia that does stuff before you submit your form, then you might want to use validation that affects that form. But in some cases you don't have it. So yeah, with Inertia, you would, so far, at least until now, you would have to manually do stuff to do this, like keep your own logic essentially. But now we allow you to, on the form itself, set the errors so that gets updated and all of your logic stays the same, essentially making the form helper even richer. Set error manually. Let's see. For a first talk, this is, let's see. Set error, email, this is an error. Great, amazing. So we'll call that, we'll call manual error. I'm not doing myself any favors with all of this red styling, but we'll just roll with it. So you can see like it's dirty, everything is a problem. So we call the defaults, it's still dirty, but as we then reset it, using the wrong button, that's fine. If you call manual error, you'll see that this should update. And you can see it's now having errors, and the errors themselves are updated. So that's basically everything that's new in Inertia. The set errors feature and the defaults. Now there are some questions that I know exist, which I will go over real quick. I'll just let this slide go through because I expected to do this a bit differently. These are all the existing ones, and then these two are the new ones. Let's see. Come on. There we go. Set errors and defaults. Now, what's upcoming? We made a global visits hook. So instead of having to continuously, if you have a specific header you use, custom header for your load balancer or whatever, instead of having to set that up everywhere or keeping a custom version of your form visits, you can now, in the new version that was released a week ago, you can add defaults on top of your headers. So when you make the call, instead of the call being made directly, it will first call your global hook, visit option hook, and it will pass to you visit through there, allowing you to modify and overwrite the values that's there conditionally or however you want, or add headers, like I said before, and then return it, and then that will be used to make the actual visit. So if you have a header that's used everywhere, you can set it up in one place, and it will be used everywhere. That's something that's new. Like I said, great place to define application-wide headers. And then as far the big question that I know is on everybody's mind, first-class dialogues and model support, which is something we've been teasing for, well, I think like up to a year now, I think, half a year. It's something we're very close on. They have their own URL. Jonathan did a demo of it before. It's not just a model. You can have slide overs come in with edit function, where you can click through a list and just have like the edit on the right. And if you visit them directly, you will go to the main page that the model is supposed to open on, and then the model will open on that page. So they have their own unique URLs, and they can take any form you want, basically your own flavor of models or dialogues. And we're working on it still right now. I am unable to demo it, but again, Jonathan did demo it before in a very work in progress state. We're still working on it actively. I'm literally working on it this week. And yeah, we hope to really ship that soon, because it's also something we are really excited about. And honestly, it's taking us way too long. But we do what we can. I mean, it's still an open source project, right? And with that, yeah, that's it. I'm going to wrap it up because that's all I had for you.
Cool, thanks, Claudio. And don't mind deadlines. There are no deadlines in open source. Take as long as you need for this. Yeah, thanks for showing us all of this cool stuff. I do have one question.
Of course.
A simple one. The server-side rendering stuff. Is that something that you would recommend using in production now, or is it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's stable enough to do.
No doubt in my mind. We actually the way that we did stuff before is so initially when we started doing sponsorships with Inertia, we did it not to get money. We did it with the idea of, I know people are going to hate me for saying this, reducing the amount of people that use the feature. Because by having only a limited amount of people that are using it, we are able to get bug reports and test it with a couple of people and really go in depth with those specific issues without having the entire world scream at you like, hey, why is it not working?
Yeah.
And having to respond to that like, sorry, we're still testing it, it's still being worked on. So by having it sponsor only, we got a bit of a kickback, a bit of a help, a thank you, if you will, as well as to like keep it with a close group of people. And we tested it, and surprisingly, it's been super stable.
Nice.
And in part, it's because with everything in Inertia, we try to stick to the defaults of the underlying frameworks as much as possible. We do not want you to worry about, or we don't even want ourselves to reinvent the wheel. If we already have these great languages like, PHP with Laravel, I mean, the frameworks, like Laravel and Vue and React, if you already have those things and they're already really good at what they do, why not lean on that? So that's what we did with SSR, and that's why for the most part it just works. And yeah, it's super stable. Definitely recommend using it in production.
Okay.
Forge is running with it, and I know a lot of bigger apps even are as well.
That's interesting to know that it's being used, for such an app, because Forge is certainly a large-scale application with lots of users and lots of complexity in the views there.
Absolutely, yeah, and it was actually it's funny because by moving from Blade to Inertia, we reduced I think like 49,000 lines of code. It's a huge app, so I mean it's all in comparison, right? It's relevant, relative. Sorry.
Yeah.
But it reduced a lot of code and a lot of complexity, all because we're just leaning on inertia now. And as for like the SSR side of things, like if that wasn't a possibility, if we weren't able to use SSR, then it wouldn't have been in inertia. So it was also a bit of a kick in our back to really get that out there, because I cannot see myself at this point building front-end apps in any other way than inertia.
Nice. So it must feel good to also help building the tool that you love to use as well. So
absolutely,
you're in a pretty good place.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I'm super happy with it, and I like I know that people are like always pushing and asking like, when is it gonna be done? When is this thing gonna be done? And the only response that I'm trying to like, not reply to every comment, because I just get myself really excited. Like I know I also want to get it done, but if I need to reply to these comments, I will never get it done. But it's fine.
I have like this tagline. I've already said it to you. There are no deadlines in open source, and that's basically enough explanation, I think. So
absolutely,
take
and
your time.
that's also why I don't why we also don't make a roadmap public, because if we do that, we just shoot ourselves in the foot, and people are gonna expect it, and then it becomes work, and then it's not fun.
Yeah, then the fun is out of there. Yeah, indeed.
And ironically enough, I noticed that like when it does become work, it actually in a way takes longer because your whole motivation is gone, and then you'll get nothing done. But if it's like a side project or a hobby thing, and if it's like a community thing where everybody's just able to work on it and there's no deadlines, it's so much more fun to work on it, and stuff gets done a lot better and so much quicker.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like we're like sliding into a second talk, this one about the open source a little bit.
Probably. I can highly recommend anyone to at least give it a shot, even if you get your PRs rejected. Contributing to open source, like I can now see I was on that mountain that's called Laravel. I've been there. Like that's because I contributed to open source. Like I've done like 10, 15 years of PHP, and like nowhere but the last 2-3 years is like open source, and way up there real quick.
Yeah, I hear that story from a lot of people, and I've also experienced that myself as well.
It's really cliche though, just to not go off topic and too long, but it's really cliche because like if you think about it, as an open source product or as an open source maintainer, I recommend you do open source. It's like, you just want me to work on your thing. And like in a way I could say like, of course I want that. That would be great. Wouldn't it be awesome to work on something together? But at the same time, it's like, no, it's just really that good. It's like, sure, you don't get anything in return. Sure, there is no, like, it's free. It's like everybody can do it. But it's like the benefits that it brings aren't tangible. Like people get to know your work. They see your mentality. They see how you operate. They see who you are. They want to work with you, and you get a bit of familiarity, experience. You get a super extra bonus on your resume in terms of hireability. So definitely recommend it.
Yeah, there are basically no downsides to doing that. I agree with that.
It's risk. It's the risk that your project or thing will not succeed, or that your that your PRs will be rejected. And that's if you cannot handle that, then it can be a very painful experience. But in general, I also don't see any downsides at all.
Okay, Claudio, this is all we have time for. We ran a little bit over time, but as it's a online meetup.
Yeah.
There are no real deadlines here as
Yeah.
well. Quite a few people have sticked with us until the end. Yeah, I want to thank you for being on this meetup, and congratulations
First
on
talk.
doing your first talk. So that yeah, that's out of the way for you, and I hope that
For
you'll do
sure.
it again sometime. We'll see.
If people will have me, then definitely.
Cool. Okay, man. Thanks again,
Thank you.
and
Yes, of course.
until the next time.
Awesome. All right. See you.
See you, Claudio. Okay, we are at the end of the meetup as well. Yeah, thank you for sticking until the end. I haven't planned a new edition yet, but probably I will. And yeah, follow me on Twitter or subscribe to this channel to get notified when I plan another one. I have no concrete plans, but probably in the next few weeks or so, I'll announce another one. I hope that you enjoyed this one as much as I did, and I'll see you the next time. Bye bye, everybody.